Let's talk about maybe the next criteria, which apply very specifically to agencies, and this is something that is important for agency owners to think about, which you talked about, is to have a management team in place, right? If you're trying to sell a business and claiming that there's more than 500,000 or 400,000 or 500,000 in profit, there needs to be a management team that is running that business. Because that's exactly right. If somebody's going to pay $1.5 million, they're not trying to buy a job. They're buying a business.
Welcome to Show Me the Nuggets, where each week Joe chats with world-class entrepreneurs to find out the key principles, strategies, and processes that lie behind their outstanding achievements. Now, your host, the no-bullshit serial entrepreneur, Joe Troyer.
Hey everybody, it's Joe Troyer, and welcome back to another episode of Show Me the Nuggets. And guys, I'm super excited for today's episode with Dustin Struckman. So Dustin and I actually met in passing through a mutual acquaintance and mutual business associate. And I was really excited. I wanted to chat with Dustin, but I literally had to run to another meeting. And it was at an event in New York City. So you know how those things are. Like, it's just utter crazy. And we didn't get a chance to connect. And we reached out after and wanted to pull him on the show. So you guys are in for a treat. So real quick, before we have Dustin on, for those of you guys joining us, Dustin essentially owns a brokerage that focuses on selling agencies and also SaaS businesses. And at the end of the day, I wanted to pull him on to pick his brain for each and every one of you guys to really think about what it takes to sell an agency and really think about starting with the end in mind and building an agency to sell. So man, Dustin, I'm super excited to have you today.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me on. It's good to connect. I look forward to talking.
All right, perfect. So, man, your quick bio, you're a partner at digitalacquisitions.co. And what my team found is that you guys are kind of a concierge brokerage service. Can you talk about kind of what types of businesses you work with, what you don't, who's your right fit?
Yeah, so we work with primarily, like you said, SaaS and digital agencies. So those are our kind of two main businesses we work with. We also work with e-commerce businesses and content sites, but the main two are SaaS and digital agencies.
And that's really interesting, and a point that I think we'll dive into, but I don't see a lot of digital agencies for sale out there by a lot of brokerages. So I'm really interested where you're finding these, where you're selling them, because I don't see much inventory. So I'm excited to pick your brain with that.
Yeah, I'll just tell you, the first one happened by accident. You know, I was, like I said, focused on SaaS, but through LinkedIn, somebody connected with me and was like, hey, I have a friend with an agency that wants to sell it. Can you help? And I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. And through that process, I found that we had a lot of buyers in our database that wanted agencies. And then the second one came as a result of that one. He's like, hey, I saw that you have an agency for sale. I have an agency. Do you want to sell mine? And I was like, sure. And that's just sort of how it started. And through that process, I mean, that particular one, we had, I think, 5 bidders who were disappointed that they didn't get it. So, you know, we found, okay, we have a market for agencies. And so then we started actively looking for agencies that might want to sell.
Perfect. Yeah, that's beautiful. So then it looks like you guys have a service, Escrow Trade. I'm assuming that kind of helps you guys run through the escrow service and escrow process of the sale.
Yes. Escrow.trade is, that's sort of a sister company that, that we use to close the transactions and escrows to protect everybody involved.
All right, perfect. Then my podcast head producer, Eduardo, found that you're actually the co-founder of another company called Only Call.
Yeah, I have a number. I have a number of projects. I've been doing this I've been self-employed since I was 19. I think that was before the internet even existed. It was just in the early days. So
Gotcha.
Since 1995, I've been starting and selling online businesses, which is how I actually got into the brokerage. I sold, I think, 4 or 5 businesses through this brokerage before I became a partner. And then over the course of a couple years, I ended up buying out the original owner of the business, and now it's just mine.
Man, that's awesome. So let's just jump right in. So what makes digital acquisitions and your brokerage different than other brokerages? Like what's kind of your unique spin, or what do you guys do differently?
Yeah, we take a very hands-on approach. I can't speak for every brokerage out there. I'm sure there are others that, take a similar approach, but the ones that I know about, the kind of the bigger ones that you might know about, it seems like they're more of a kind of a directory approach where, to take on any number of listings and just to have a big directory that's full of listings. Whereas we work very hands-on. I personally won't do more than 3 listings personally at a time, and same for all of my brokers.
Wow.
So we work tirelessly to get the deals closed because we only have a limited number of deals at any given time. So it's not like, hey, let's put 100 deals up, and if 3 of them close, great, and we don't care about the 97 that don't because we got 3 that close. I'm working on 1, 2, or 3 at a time, so I care about each one of them. So I feel like that's why we call ourselves a concierge. Like that gives us more of a personal touch, and really really invested in every deal.
Yeah, that's perfect. I find that brokers are a dime a dozen, but I wouldn't say, based upon what you just said, concierge brokers. I haven't had the pleasure of dealing with many concierge brokers. Usually the brokers I'm dealing with, I feel like I'm educating them,
Right.
hey, there's a problem in the P&L. This doesn't add up. This doesn't make sense. This
Right.
business structure is asinine. What do you mean, the profit margin's 30% net? I'm like educating the broker, like, hey, did you see this? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
so man, that's refreshing.
Yeah, we feel like that sets us apart, and I think that I win a lot of deals because of that. Because even from the initial stages, you can tell that I'm invested and engaged and really care about the deal.
So when somebody brings a business to you, Dustin, like what are some of the kind of qualification criteria? Like what are you looking for in order for it to be one of those 1, 2, or 3 deals that you take on at a time? Obviously, I'm sure you get hit with a lot of deal flow, and obviously
Yeah.
you're going to have to turn a lot of those down. What are the
Yes. Yep.
things that people need to be doing now so that they can
Yep.
come to you and make sure that they can work with somebody that's a good broker and not representing literally dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of different businesses?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's exactly right. That's the other side of that hands-on approach, is that we're very selective in the businesses that we work with. 2 things. I have an ebook called Exit on Demand that
Okay.
or white paper, actually I call it, that goes over everything you need to do to make sure your business is ready for sale.
Yep.
High level, broad strokes, stuff that is actually accomplishable, not down to the nitty gritty. Sometimes we have to refer people off to a consultant that's going to work with them for a year to get the financials in order and get a growth strategy that makes sense so that the business is sellable.
Yep.
But high level, there are some basic things that you need to do that are covered in that white paper. And then what I'm looking for when I'm evaluating a business is I like to see a business that has profit. A lot of there's I kind of there are a couple points of education, right? And I think before I get into that, let me dispel some of the confusion out there, where SaaS businesses in particular, and I know that most of the audience here is agencies, right? But SaaS businesses in
Yeah.
particular have this notion that you can sell a business without any profit, and that is true once it gets to a certain size.
Yeah.
So, and SaaS businesses are fairly unique in that once they get to a certain size, you can sell it based on a multiple of top line revenue.
Yeah.
But even SaaS businesses and every other kind of business is only going to trade on a multiple of profit. So if somebody comes to me and says, "Yeah, I've got this great business, it's not making profit yet, but there's a ton of potential," that's not something I can sell. That's something that
Yeah.
you might be able to go to a VC and convince them that you've got this great idea, and all they need to do is give you money to get it profitable. And that may work, but that's not my world. So
Yeah.
buyers, people who want to acquire businesses, they want to buy on a multiple of profit. So that's the first thing, is that the business needs to be profitable. And for a smaller business, say a business that's making less than $500,000 a year in net profit, that can be the definition of profit can be a little bit more flexible. It doesn't have to be a really rigid EBITDA. It can be SDE, or seller discretionary earnings. So, but once you get above about 500,000 in net profits, it needs to be more formalized, and it needs to be EBITDA, which means that the profit is after someone running the business takes their salary. So under that price range, it's acceptable that you consider the money you're taking out of the business personally to be profit, but above that, it really needs to be formalized with a CEO or somebody, a salary in place, and then profit is after that. So that's the first
the
thing.
key number is 500,000?
Yeah, around there.
It's
nothing.
crazy. I've seen
Nothing
like
set.
mill and a half, and it's all SDE, and they're trying to pull out their multiple on SDE, and I'm like, what do you mean? There's no team here. The owner's
Yeah,
working like 80 hours a week. Like I don't want to buy a job. Like no
that's right.
thanks. Like
That's right.
this is
That doesn't fly. That's exactly right. And and it's just this is all coming from what the market
yeah.
will bear, right? And this is something that I spend a lot of time educating my brokers, and then also educating sellers on, is that this is not my opinion. This is not, just like Dustin's rules. This is what buyers say to me when I put up a business and I say, yeah, it's 640 top line and 630 net. And they're like, no, that exactly like you said. That we have to make allowances for somebody to actually run that business.
Yep.
So, and that may be the case. You may be running your business with no one in place. And there are SaaS businesses, not agencies, but there are SaaS businesses that can coast for a year or two without anybody running it.
Yep.
So, yeah. And so let's talk about maybe the next criteria, which apply very specifically to agencies. And this is something that is important for agency owners to think about, which you talked about, is to have a management team in place, right? If you're trying to sell a business and claiming that there's more than 500,000 or 400,000 or 500,000 in profit, there needs to be a management team that is running that business. Because that's exactly right. If somebody's going to pay $1.5 million, they're not trying to buy a job. They're buying a business. And so that business, they absolutely are going to come in and they're going to provide vision and leadership and make plans and strategies, but there needs to be a team in place that's executing the daily operations of the business.
Yep.
So that's the second thing I look for in, is a business sellable? Is it actually a business, or is it just a job? And at a smaller level, you can sell a job. There are people who just want to be self-employed, right? And maybe they cashed out the 401k, or they got an inheritance, or any number of ways they have a chunk of cash and they don't want to go get a job working for somebody else. It's a great lifestyle business to make $300,000 or $400,000 a year and actually work in the business. That's fantastic. Yeah. But above a certain level, that investor is looking to buy a business that then they can scale. And that means that they're not working in it on a daily basis. So that's the second thing I look for. Is there a team in place? And part of that is, are there systems, right? Are there systems in place that support that team? And are the systems documented? That's a huge thing I learned in selling my own businesses, was that I would either have to support the buyer for 2 years afterwards. Even if we agreed to 3 months, they'd be calling me and emailing me, well, how does this work? And how does that work? And so after a couple of those, I started documenting everything. And this is in the white paper, but this is probably the single biggest piece of advice I can give to a business owner, is if you have to do something more than once, document it. And if you can, automate it. But at the very least, document it so you can outsource it. And also then when you go to sell it, every single process, anything you have to do more than once should have a process, and technically is a process, right? And if it's documented, then it can be outsourced, or an employee can handle it, or potentially it can be automated. So yeah, systems, team, documentation, those are some big things that make a business versus just a job.
So those are some great criteria. I'm curious, like who's buying agencies right now? Who's the persona of kind of the buyers in the marketplace, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a couple different. It's one, it could be just an individual who like I said, for whatever reason has some cash or can get an SBA loan, has some collateral and can get, that's a really great way to buy a business. And agencies are ripe for SBA loans. SBA is happy with agencies because they understand the model better than they do some of these other digital businesses. So it can be an individual who wants to own a business, and it could either be their first, or maybe they have a history of owning businesses and they see opportunity in the agency space. It could be a portfolio buyer who has a number of other businesses or services that an agency fits with, so like that they can kind of dovetail the agency services with the other services they're offering, which could either be professional services or software services. Hands-on agency services are a great upsell for software, do-it-yourself software. So that's another kind of buyer. And then a third kind of buyer would be a bigger agency that doesn't do what this specific agency does. Maybe they are a PPC agency and you're an SEO agency and they don't have SEO, or you focus on social media and they haven't gotten into that yet. So they want to buy the systems and the processes and the teams, which is why it comes back to, is it actually a business, an asset that they can acquire and immediately plug into their customer base? So those are kind of the three kinds of buyers.
And why do you think that the three types of buyers that you're seeing in the market, why do you think that they're buying instead of building?
Well, I mean, I think that's the same for any business, any buyer who's buying instead of building, is time to market and a proven proof of concept, right?
Yep.
So yes, they could just go out, and a lot of times that will be, and especially with agencies, that will be kind of the question, buy or build, right? Is like, is it less expensive and or faster, which means I can make a quicker return on investment to buy it versus building it. So it really comes down to the value of the agency and whether it makes more sense to acquire it versus just go out and duplicate it.
And you talked a little bit about systems and processes and how important they are, kind of team. So we talked about some things that kind of make an agency attractive to buyers.
Yes.
What are some other things? Like something that comes to mind is like, is niching down a big deal, or is productizing a big deal, or
productizing is big. Yes, that's super important. And I think that it depends on the size of the business as far as niching down, right? A smaller business should be more niched, and then once you get to a certain size, it probably makes sense to start offering additional services and spreading out.
In terms of niching down, we run a lot of marketing on behalf of agencies, white label fashion, that invisible PPC up there.
Yeah.
So we get the question all the time, like, will you help me do marketing? Will you run Google ads for me as a marketing agency? And we're like, yeah, that's fine. Who's your target? Well, people that want your services. Okay, but like, you're one of how many? Right? Like, what makes you different? Oh, well, I work with you guys. Well, that doesn't make you different. So what we always come down to is like, if you picked a niche and you had a standard service offering and you could prove that you could close clients from cold traffic, 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 from a strategy session into a monthly recurring deal, then of course we could, right? But if you can't pick a niche, you can't stay in a lane, you can't become an expert, you're just like everybody else, like you're gonna fail. And no, we can't do it because we know that you're gonna fail. And it's hard, like it hurts me to tell people that, right? Like, it's very harsh. So I'm always looking for ways to tell people, like, hey man, you got to pick a niche because of this. It's not just about me, it's about you. Like, you got to be able to advertise and not sink. So I'm curious, your thoughts on niching down and really having an avatar. I mean, I would assume that that's really important when you go to sell, having a proven sales process that they could throttle up and down is probably going to be a huge, lever on your multiple, I would think, at the end of the day.
So I wouldn't say that it has a huge effect on the multiple as much as it just determines whether you can sell the business at all or not. So that's the case in a lot of across all the different kinds of businesses. So there are things that maybe from the outside you would think, oh, this is going to affect the multiple. If I've got, like, for example, in a SaaS business, if I've got like really good technology, then I'm going to get a better multiple. Well, no, if you have yes, a little bit, maybe between 3 and 4x, it'll change, right? But if you've got really bad, really bad tech, you're not going to be able to sell it. Is the bottom line.
Yeah.
So same
That
thing.
makes
Same
sense.
thing with an agency is
Okay.
yeah. If you don't have a system to convert leads into clients, you're just not going to be able to sell it.
And what do you think like volume or that sniff test is that you would want to see, right? For that to make sense. Like having that process is like, yeah, I have that process, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's like the real, black and white, yes, you have that or no, you don't. Like what are you going to want to see?
Do you mean like conversion percentage? Is that what you're asking me?
Conversion percentage, or like, hey, they're strategically onboarding a client every 2 weeks, or how would you say
Uh-huh.
like, yes, they fit that bill, yes,
Yeah.
they can turn on campaigns and bring on customers, or no, they can't. Like, what are you
Right.
looking for? What's going to pass that sniff test?
Yeah, so that usually will be the best metric for that is growth.
Yeah,
Is the new customer acquisition and new revenue acquisition outpacing the churn of existing customers and clients?
yeah.
So if the business is growing, if the month over month, year over year revenue is increasing, then that proves that they have a model in place that is repeatable and scalable.
So let's talk about the opposite. What scares the shit out of your buyers in an agency? What are the things that at the 10-yard line, you're pulling your hair out going, why didn't I know this sooner? Or, what are those problems, the big ugly
Yeah.
ones?
Yeah, so I'll tell you the main things that'll make an agency unsellable is high client concentration. So if more than 20% of your revenue comes from one client, that starts to get scary. As you get up into
Yep.
like the 50% range, then it's almost impossible to sell. So unless you have a long-term contract, like, yeah, they're 50% of our revenue, but we have a 3-year contract, which has renewed every 3 years for the past decade.
Yep.
It's still not great. So client concentration is one thing. And then the other thing would be really short lifespan of a client. If somebody comes in and,
Yep.
or if the average customer is only staying for a month or 2 months,
Yep.
then that's a red flag as well. So
Yep.
the things that make it more attractive are to have a large number of clients making up your revenue, and that
Yep.
they stay on for 6, 7, 9 months or more. So I've seen some agencies where they've had clients that have been on for 7 years.
Yeah.
It's like that's a really good sign. you know
Yeah, for sure.
so yeah.
So I'm going to pick on the gorilla in the room, the 500-pound gorilla, the digital marketers of the world, right? Teaching to go
Yeah.
sell businesses these huge consulting packages right out of the gate, right? As kind of a pre-qualifier before you ever really do anything or really engage with them. What are your thoughts on that in the real world and an agency or somebody wanting to buy a business like that? It just seems like the stick in the retention is almost
Mhm.
not there. It's
Yeah.
like almost just all front end revenue instead of recurring revenue.
Yeah. I think it depends on what your goals are, right? So I mean, those guys are smart guys.
Yeah, for sure.
They they
Really
built
smart.
amazing businesses, and they teach people how to make money. So it depends on if you wanna maximize your income, or if you want to build a business that's sellable.
Yeah.
And it also really, I think also depends on your personality, right?
Yep.
So one of those is a very, very high touch, very hands-on sales
Yeah.
process. And the other can be turned into a system that can be run by a team and to a certain extent automated.
Yeah.
So, I think that you can make a ton of money doing that model that you just described, if that's your personality and your goal is to
Yep.
make money right now, but
Yep.
you're the one doing it. Like
For sure.
you're in sales. You're a
Yep.
high ticket
Yep.
salesperson. So yeah, I think both models work. Just depends on what your goals are and your
Definitely.
personality. Yeah.
Yeah. I would 100% agree. I see a lot of people that I work with, hands on, very successful agencies running campaigns like that for companies, very high dollar, but everything lives or dies with them. And
Yeah.
it's,
Exactly.
it's so fickle. It's not even funny. It's
Yeah.
like I'm
Yeah.
getting a text message like, woo, 20 grand more a month. And the next day or that afternoon, woo, oh crap, I just lost 30 grand a month.
Yeah, totally.
It's just
Yes.
there's no systems and processes, and if you're looking to sell,
That
ultimately,
business is probably not sellable.
you're not going to be able to.
That's right.
Most
Yeah.
likely.
Oh, a couple other things, or at least one, that makes a business more difficult to sell is, and unfortunately, I think a lot of agency owners do this unknowingly when they start their agency, is they brand it around themselves. Even sometimes the domain name is like
Yeah.
Chris's agency, and you're like, well, I mean, it's going to be hard to sell that, my friend, because the chances of you, and now this is funny. I had a consulting business. My most recent business that I sold before I got into digital acquisitions. It was a consulting business, and I sold it to someone named Dustin. But the odds, and so like it was so I had like 50 plus glowing customer reviews like Dustin's amazing, Dustin and his team, Dustin did this for me, Dustin did that, and I happened to sell it to somebody named Dustin. But the odds of that happening are very, very slim. So don't brand your agency. And it wasn't branded to me, but all of the testimonials were in my name, and they were all on a third party site because I was an expert, an expert in one of these big
Yep.
platform directories, and all of the testimonials have my name in it. But that, I think, is very much a exception to the rule. So don't brand your agency around your name or your personality because it's going to make it harder to sell it.
That's a big one for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So talking about kind of multiples, what are you seeing in the space today in terms of multiples for agencies?
Yeah. I think anywhere from like 2.5 to maybe 3.5 on the high end is, and this is on profit, right? This is on annual net profit, would be the range that agencies trade in. And then that range is dependent on a number of things that we've kind of covered. All the things that we talked about that make a business sellable do affect the multiple a bit.
Yep.
But 3x on profit is a really kind of a standard for agencies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that up over $500,000 a year in order to get that, or like what are the main things in order to get that 3x, right? Like kind of, are there any black and white scenarios or?
Nothing's ever black and white. It's always an art and a science kind of melded together to come up with a multiple or an asking price. And the reality is that the market will always determine. And it's amazing how accurate the market is. When you have offers coming in, they're not going to be all over the place. They're going to be concentrated around a very narrow range. So around 3x for pretty much any size business, even if you're making 150,000 a year and it's pure SDE, that could go. I mean, that could go for anywhere from 300 to 450,000, depending on the particular business. But a business doing 500,000 in net profits should go for 1.2 to 1.5 pretty easily.
And then what are you seeing in the marketplace today with the agency transactions that you're doing? Like what percentage of deals are done with cash versus financing versus like what should somebody's expectations be? Right? If I'm going to sell my business today for 1.2 to 1.5, what's that going to look like versus a smaller transaction? And is that going to be mostly cash or mostly seller financing? Or help me understand kind of what's happening.
Yeah. I think if you were to go and try and sell your agency on your own, you would more likely end up with a majority of it being seller financing. When you sell with a brokerage like mine, we'll get multiple offers that will, for the most part, end up with cash. A majority of the purchase price cash at closing. And when I say majority, I mean like 70, 80% cash at closing. But the funds could be coming from a number of different, it could be an SBA loan, it could be a standard bank loan, it could be cash that the buyer has. So the source of the funds can vary, and then but the terms of the deal will most likely be at least 80%, 70, 80% cash at closing. And then the rest would be either a note, which would be subverted if it were an SBA loan, or it could be a holdback in escrow to hedge against a certain risks. So there are a number of ways that the structure of that remaining 20% could be handled. But yeah, that's a good expectation for breakdown of cash at closing versus anything else.
And in terms of agencies, again, kind of exclusively, what's a timeline to sell a business in the agency business? I'm sure that there's all kinds of scenarios, but let's say it's actually ready to sell. Everything's in order, right? There isn't a ton of work to be done when they come to you. The books are clean, right? Like everything's audited. You got systems and processes. It's all laid out really nice. You just get like, here you go, Dustin. Here's everything you need. What's the timeline on a deal like that?
If it's a great business, and like I said, typically the only businesses we take on are going to be great businesses. We'll see offers within 2 to 3 weeks, like solid offers within 2 to 3 weeks. And that's enough time for us to market, kind of do the initial round of questions, do some light due diligence, have calls between the buyer and the seller. We'll do initial calls with the buyer to feel them out and do the preparatory work. So for all of that to transpire and then get to a solid offer, a written offer, anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks for a good business. And then closing after that depends on the source of financing specifically. So like an SBA loan is going to take probably 60 days to get approved and funded and then closed. And that's if things go according to plan. Deals are not a straight path. So 60 to 90 days for an SBA loan, and then other sources of funds are probably about the same timeline, although they're taking that amount of time for different reasons. It's more formalized with an SBA loan, whereas private funds could close in 3 weeks.
Yep.
That would be very fast. And then on the long end, if it's a bigger deal and there are more moving parts, then maybe part of it is equity in the bigger company. Those can take longer. It could be 3 to 6 months. So, but it shouldn't. The whole process shouldn't take more than 9 months. And on the short end, it could be as little as 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, we just had somebody on, not the last episode, I think the episode before, Steven Spear, talking about SBA financing, which is really interesting. Crazy how many deals in the marketplace, so to speak, are being financed, e-com businesses, agencies with SBAs. I never had the slightest inkling that was really happening.
I know. It's such SBA loans are like, they're like magic. The buyer puts down 10%, and buys a business that cash flows more than their loan payments. It's like, how is this even possible?
It's crazy. Then we talked a little bit about what's the name? Rob's, where you take a 401k and you pull that out, and that takes some ownership in the business with Steven.
Oh, wow.
You can actually use that as the down payment out of your 401k, and it's completely tax deferred. So like you don't have to have any money. Like literally, you can pull it out of 401k, no cash.
SBA loans are incredible. Yeah.
Absolutely insane. Are you finding that people are pretty open to SBA loans and non-cash deals when you're representing buyers or sellers?
I'll be honest with you, two competing offers, all things being equal, a cash buyer is preferable to an SBA buyer.
Yeah.
So, that's just the reality. So if we have multiple offers, they're at the same price, the same terms, and one of them is going to go out and try to get an SBA loan and the other one has cash, we're going to go with the cash buyer always.
Of course. But if the deal's a little bit better, it's a little sweeter, potentially they'll take the SBA deal. So, I mean, that's
and if we feel quite confident that the buyer is going to be able to secure the loan. So, that's the only problem with SBA loans is it's outside of everyone's control. And, I've had SBA deals where the day before closing, the bank decides that the buyer doesn't have enough experience. And it's like, well, what have you been doing the last 45 days? We're ready to go. or like this happens too. Somebody leaves the job because they work at a bank, right? And they're not committed there for life. And like 2 weeks before closing, somebody in the underwriting department leaves and a new person comes in and they don't like the deal. The other guy loved it and then this person doesn't. So SBA loans are always less preferable, but when they work, they're incredible.
Oh, for sure. So I'm going to make sure and put a link to your little white paper in the show notes here below this. In wrapping this up, I'm trying to make sure that I didn't skip anything. I think definitely the one thing I would advise people beyond just going through your white paper is go sign up for your deals. I saw that there's a listing, so any new deal that you get, you send out an email blast that looks like I'm going to sign up. I want to start looking at these agency deals. What's good? What's bad? What's the multiple look like? Right? So I can get a better finger of the pulse of the industry. You've helped us do that a lot today, and really appreciate it. But nothing's going to help us or prepare me, I know, more than actually looking at the deals themselves. So definitely would recommend you guys take a look at those.
And that white paper will really help a lot as well. Look, there are some things in there that are very basic, but at the same time, I've seen businesses that haven't done them. And it's like, you don't have a separate bank account for your business? You can't sell this. Like you're running it through your personal bank account? Like it's not sellable. So like there are some very basic things in there, but it's surprising the number of businesses that know them. There are also, some things that maybe you haven't thought of so that white paper will be really helpful. I've been really jealous of you the whole time. You've got your brand behind you and I've just got my living room. I do have my digital acquisition shirt on. So
well, this is just because we sponsor events, right? So this is our same setup that we take to the events, right? Our backdrop. But
yeah. I think I should get that for my next interview because I can't just stand here like this the whole time.
Yeah. Well, you could, but
I guess it's good framing, and then you can see my more.
I'm curious. Let's shift the boat a little bit. Let's talk about the opposite. We've been all like rah. Let's sell agencies.
Yeah.
I think maybe selling's a bad idea.
Oh, that's a good question. I think you should only sell your business if you have something better to do. And that could be any number of things. I sold an agency because the owner wanted to spend more time with his kids. So it doesn't have to be start a new business. It doesn't have to be a new idea. But don't just sell your business because you can. Because, if you don't have something to do with the cash or something else to do with your life, then you may find yourself 3 years down the road, you've spent all the money, and now what are you going to do? So only sell your business if you have a good reason for it. And also, I will say that it's much harder to sell a business if you don't have a good reason for it, because the buyer will be like, well, if this is such a great business, why are you selling it?
Yeah,
right.
Sure. It's like the number one question. Like as soon as you start to understand the business, it's like, all right, well, what's wrong with this thing?
Right. Why are you trying to get rid of it? And if you don't have a good answer for that, it's an uphill battle, and it's hard to explain. Well, I just want to. Well, why? So yeah, I think only sell your business if you have a good reason to do so, and that could be, I've got a new business that I want to start, and realistically, it can't just be wishy-washy, like I have a new idea. It's like I really am very committed to this new project, so much so that I'm willing to let go of this great business that I already built.
Yep.
Or like I said, I have 2 young kids. This is a real story. I have 2 young kids, and I feel like I never see them, and I want to spend more time with them. And that's also a perfectly reasonable reason. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a brilliant way to say it. I think I would answer it like, when is selling a bad idea? When you don't know without a shadow of a doubt that you can replace that income in 3 years.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
3x,
Totally.
Right? 2.5 times or whatever your multiple is. Like if you can't do that, then why would you sell it?
Right.
That's the way that I look at it, I guess.
Yeah. It's kind of the same way of saying two ways of saying the same thing.
Yeah. Yours was a little more eloquent though. We'll take that one and put it in the show notes. All right. So Dustin, where would you go if you were on the hunt to buy an agency for yourself? Where would you go to find an agency or agencies, prospective agencies?
Yeah. Look, realistically, I would talk to somebody like you. I would talk to people who work with agencies, and who talk to agencies every day. So you know a lot more agencies than I do. I know the ones that I specifically represent or that have talked to me about selling. You're working with agencies all the time. So then this is I think true for any kind of search for an acquisition, is the people who deal with those kinds of businesses as their clients.
Yeah.
So
find their suppliers. Yeah. Find their vendors.
Yeah.
All right, man. So in wrapping it up, one last question. It's been great. I feel like at the end of every podcast episode, there's always like, hey, Dustin, what 3 books do you recommend? So we do things a little different here at Show Me the Nuggets.
Right.
So we always ask, what's the one book that, as you look at your business today, you see has made like the biggest impact on the way that business is set up, the way that it runs, the way that it exists today?
Yeah. The one book I would recommend to everyone it's called Getting to Yes. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a book on negotiations and how to do what he calls principle-based negotiations, which is just a brilliant take on negotiations. And it works. What's so beautiful about this process is that it works just as well if everyone is aware of the framework for the negotiations. It's not like you have the upper hand if you're you're doing the hard tactics and the other party isn't. Everyone benefits by using principled negotiations, and even if the other party isn't, you still benefit from knowing these techniques and using them. And I think negotiations, it doesn't just apply to buying and selling a business. It applies to everything you do every day of your life. So yeah, Getting to Yes
Definitely.
would be the number one book I'd recommend to anyone, not just business owners.
Awesome. I'm excited. Most of the book recommendations I've read, and actually haven't read that one. I've heard of it.
Right.
So I appreciate the recommendation. I can actually go consume it. And I think, negotiations is so key. Sales is so key, even not in sales. Like everything in life is a sale. Like it is. Like, honey, will you take the kids out for dinner tonight? Like is a sale, right? Will you watch the kids tomorrow so I can go to the gym? Is a sale. Like we should be good at negotiating.
Totally. Yeah. And what I really love about Getting to Yes is it's not just about getting your way. It's about getting your way in a way where everybody wins. And that's kind of the principled negotiations. And yeah, so you'll love it. It's a great book.
Well, thank you so much, Dustin, man. I really appreciate you spending the last 45 minutes or so with us. I know everybody's going to love it. And I'll make sure to link up to everything in the show notes, and have an absolutely fantastic rest of your week, Dustin.
You too, man. Good to talk to you.
All right, guys. Joe Troyer here from Digital Triggers and Show Me the Nuggets, signing out.